everyone, welcome to this session of our SEAspotlight Talk series titled How Much for That Banana Duct Tape to the Wall? I think we'll wait a couple more seconds for more attendees to join us and we will begin very shortly.
Donna. If I want to go mute, I just press that, is it? So I go mute first. Donna, can you help me, please? Okay.
Okay, I think most of us are here. So a very good afternoon to all and a very warm welcome to the talk, How Much for That Banana Duct Taped to the Wall? And this is the third talk of SEAspotlight, which is a specially curated series of panel discussions and talks organized as part of SEA-Focus 2021. Now, before we begin, please be informed that there will be a dedicated time of Q&A towards the end of the discussion. So you're very much encouraged to leave comments and questions in the Q&A function of this Zoom webinar. And that's actually located at the bottom bar of the platform. And you can do this anytime during the talk. Please allow me to quickly introduce and welcome our panelists this afternoon. We have Jim Amberson. He's an art collector and also member of the SEA-Focus Advisory Committee. We have Sandy Ma, International Specialist and Associate Director of 20th Century and Contemporary Art at Phillips, and Jasdeep Sandhu, Director of Gajah Gallery. This panel will be moderated by Elaine, Editor and Publisher of ArtAsiaPacific. Welcome, and it is a pleasure to have you all as part of today's discussion. I'll now hand the time over to Elaine, who will introduce and begin the panel. Over to you, Elaine.
Thanks, Rachel. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Elaine, and I will be moderating today's panel, How Much for That Banana Duct Tape to the Wall? In December 2019, people around the world found their social media feeds inundated with memes about an overripe banana duct taped to the wall of a gallery booth at Art Basel, Miami Beach. These range from the generic, Donald Trump, to the culturally specific, in this case, durians, being secured to the walls with sticky industrial tape. The mastermind behind the original work, called The Comedian, was Maurizio Cattelan, an internationally acclaimed self-taught artist known for his irreverent sculptures and installations. These conceptual works tend to question and comment on how value is created in the art world. For instance, 3 years prior to the banana, Cattelan caused a minor ruckus with his fully functional, solid 18-karat gold toilet, wittily titled America, and made for the Guggenheim Museum in New York. Many enthusiastic art critics predictably described the Baroque Latrine as a site-specific interactive work. The Italian artist has been called everything from genius, court jester, and the bad boy of contemporary art, while he simply calls himself an art worker. As the gallery owner, Emmanuel Perrotin, explained to CNN when it was unveiled in Miami, he said the banana is a symbol of hope, global trade, a double entendre, as well as a classic device for humor. At the end of Basel Miami's week of commotion, The Comedian, which included instructions for the owners of how to replace the banana, sold 3 editions for a total of $390,000 US. People familiar with art history understand Cattelan follows in the tradition of many great conceptual artists before him, namely Marcel Duchamp and his notorious fountain, a urinal which has since become one of the most celebrated works of the 20th century. Other artists have also made works incorporating perishable food, from Yoko Ono's Granny Smith apple in 1966 and to Rikrit Teravana's 1990 Untitled Pad Thai, which he cooked and served at Paula Allen Gallery in New York. And some have offered a set of instructions as artworks, such as Solowitz's wall drawings and Felix Gonzalez Torres' Candy Spills, a tender portrait of his dying lover, wherein he actively encouraged audiences to take and eat these individually wrapped sweets from the floor, and the museum, gallery, or organizing institution to replenish them throughout the exhibition. Despite the lineage of artists who have explored similar questions to Catalan's infamous banana, such as what constitutes art? Does it have to be made by the artist's hand? Does it have to be beautiful? Does it have to be expensive? We are continually confronted with the simple question, my kid could have made this, so why is it art? This afternoon, we have three respected figures who will discuss how the art world determines value, both literally and philosophically, with a focus on contemporary artworks, mostly from Southeast Asia. With us today, we have Sandy Ma, who is an international specialist and associate director for 20th century and contemporary art at Phillips Auction House. She was also part of the founding team for Phillips Hong Kong operations, which launched in 2016. Sandy is currently based in Singapore, advising clients in the region. We also have Jim Amberson, one of Singapore's most passionate art collectors. Originally from Minnesota, Jim has lived in Singapore since 1998. He has been described by his colleagues at work as a full-time collector who works in corporate insurance on the side. He has mainly been collecting Southeast Asian contemporary art over the last 15 years, and his holdings include Ding Hu Lei's photographic series that explores identity, memory, and history through different images of the American-Vietnam War, Maria Taniguchi's labor-intensive brick paintings, and rattan bamboo sculptures by Sophia Pitch. Amberson has a master's degree in Southeast Asian Studies from the National University of Singapore, and he currently sits on Tate Modern's Asia-Pacific Acquisition Committee. And last but not least, we have Jasdeep Sandhu, founder of Gajah Gallery in Singapore. Originally trained as a lawyer, Jasdeep opened his gallery in 1996 to promote Southeast Asian art, particularly Indonesian contemporary art. And this was well before there was any market for art from this part of the world. In 2012, Jasdeep founded Jogja Art Lab in Yogyakarta, which invites artists to experiment with different mediums, including craft-based practices, as well as new media technologies. Jasdeep has described Jogja Art Lab not simply as an extension of Gajah Gallery, but also as a way to repay in kind the artist who helped give purpose and funding to his gallery. We will begin with Sandy, who will walk us through the history of conceptual art and other non-traditional media, and will mention some unique works that have sold at auction. Next, we will open up the conversation to Jim and Jasdeep, who will respond to her presentation. And at any point during this panel, you can send over questions to S.E.A. Focus, and we will try to get through all of them at the end of the conversation. Now I'm going to pass it over to Sandy, who will introduce the historical context of today's discussion. Sandy.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you for having me here. As you know, the title of the session makes reference to Mauricio Catalan's artwork called The Comedian. In 2019, as Elaine has said, at Art Basel Miami Beach, artist Catalan showed this work, which is a banana duct taped to the wall, shown in the picture here. And he showed it at Perotan Gallery, and the asking price was 120,000 for the first edition. The gallery sold the first 2 editions, then raised the price to 150,000 for the 3rd edition and sold that too. So this artwork, as Elaine had said, has created this worldwide sensation, and the reactions ranged from anger to disbelief to outrage. How could these ordinary objects, a store-bought banana and a standard silver duct tape, be called art? And what on earth makes it worth the price tag? So almost immediately, Catalan's artwork went viral. Rachel, could you go to the previous slide? Thank you. Memes after memes popped up on the internet. Many individuals, artists, corporations also created their own versions of the artwork. No matter if you love it or hate it, it certainly stirred up a massive debate about art itself. What was even more amazing in the story was that during the fair, the New York-based artist David Datuna came up to the booth and ate the banana and called it performance art. So despite the artwork's hefty price tag, Perotan Art Gallery wasn't worried about someone stealing or eating the comedian. There was a spare banana at hand on hand at the booth, and more importantly, without the artist's certificate of authenticity, it reverts to being just a banana. In a way explained by Perotan, securing a buyer for the piece completed the artwork. A work like that, he said, if you don't sell the work, it's not a work of art. This is the backdrop against which I will start the discussions today. It is a topic that all facets of the art world have throughout history and until today wrestle with: the value of art. So to begin understanding what happened here, we need to explore the fundamentals of conceptual art, what legacy it has left behind and how it has evolved from there. Furthermore, we will touch upon the perennial questions relating to what is art, who determines that, and how, who determines the value of art and how, and why should we care about it? Finally, as this discussion is in the context of S.E.A. focus, I wanted to take the opportunity for us to discuss how these practices are being supported in Southeast Asia in the contemporary art world that we inhabit. Next, please. So what is conceptual art? Next, please. Let's start the conversation at the beginning of when conceptual art came to be. About 100 years ago, French artist Marcel Duchamp made a series of artworks taking everyday objects and calling it art. There was the bicycle wheel, bottle rack, and the urinal. The most famous of these ready-mades was Fountain, made in 1917, a standard urinal basin, signed by the artist, which was presented and just shocked the art world. It was subversive and revolutionary. Duchamp actually started off as a painter, but eventually rejected the more traditional art forms, which he then called retinal art, or art purely for the eyes. He wanted to create art for the mind. This important artwork from the Dada movement really stemmed out of the negative reactions towards the horrors of World War I. It was about a rejection of the prevailing standards in art through anti-art cultural works. In addition to being anti-war, it was also anti-bourgeois and had political affinities with the radical left. Ultimately, what Duchamp has started will remain as one of the most significant events of 20th and 21st century in the arts. Conceptual art became to be known as art faux, which the idea or concept behind the work is more important than the finished art object. Next, please. I'm going to just go through 3 more key examples of conceptual artists here to hopefully draw out the impact of this art movement on the development of the following decades. Here we have a famous work by American conceptual artist Joseph Kossuth, one of the pioneers of conceptual art and installation art. This work is called 1 and 3 Chairs. The piece features a physical chair, a photograph of that chair, and the dictionary of definition of the word chair. So there is a chair, a picture of the chair, and just a repetition in a verbal sense of what the chair is. When this work was made in New York in 1965, JFK had just been assassinated. Civil Rights Act had just been freshly been signed, and the Vietnam War and protests against it was in full effect. So it was a time of counterculture, revolutionary thoughts, and questioning of traditions. So actually this artwork is in fact very fitting for its time. Kossuth consistently explored the production and role of this language and meaning within art. By stripping art of all personal emotion, Kossuth reduced it to nearly pure information or idea, or greatly playing down the art object itself. As such, words became more meaningful than art. Next, please. Part of what conceptual art does is to elicit a reaction, whether it be a positive reaction or a negative one. Oftentimes, like Catalan's comedian, humor or irony plays a huge part in the artwork. Italian artist Piero Manzoni was one of who did this very well here. He made a series of artworks that call into question the very nature of art itself. The series were a critique of mass production and consumerism that was changing Italian society after World War II. In 1961, Manzoni created 90 small cans sealed with the text, "Artist shit." Each 30-gram can was priced, weighed based on the current value of gold at the time. The contents of the can remains much of a much disputed enigma. Nobody knows what is inside. Maybe it's plaster or something else, but we won't know because since opening the cans would destroy the value of the artwork itself. In the following years, the cans have spread to various art collections all over the world and netted large prices. And in 2015, tin number 54 was sold at an auction for the astonishing price of £125,000. The cans were originally valued at $37 each in 1961 only. So I think this is rather genius, and I could really see the influence of Manzoni's work in Catalan's Comedian, for example. Next, please. So this image here has a little anecdote. It's actually a silhouette wall painting on the side of my college museum's building in Maine, USA. The first memorable encounter of conceptual art that I have and its genius was when I was a freshman there, witnessing this group of seniors mapping out the lines for this painting, this mural. I was quite jealous of them at the time and thought it must be so much fun to be involved in making that piece. The artist's silhouette is regarded as one of the pioneer of minimalism and conceptual art. In 1968, Lewitt began to conceive a set of guidelines or simple diagrams for his two-dimensional works drawn directly on the wall that could be carried out by others. Even after his death, any draftsperson could make the drawing happen as long as they followed his guidelines and the certificate of authenticity are on hand. So it's not about the individual touch anymore, not about the touch of the artist that makes the work spectacular, but the idea and the proper execution of that that really matters. The genius of these wall drawings are that though it exists in this most simple instructions on a sheet of paper, the drawings can be made again and again anywhere in the world without the artist needing to be involved in the production. Next, please. So now we can say that basically conceptual art can be and can look like almost anything. Sometimes it does not require much skill to make it. It transports us to nowhere except the here and now. Some aren't even very beautiful. Sometimes it feels like a ripoff. There are no set rules on the use of material, and aesthetic and technical skills are being surpassed by the primary concern, which is the idea or concept. So it is also about a dematerialization process, and artworks can be ephemeral. Strangely, these might last even longer and be more permanent this way. However, paintings fade, marbles crumble, but ideas can last forever. Now, this is the beauty of conceptual art. And overall, in conceptual art, there is a commitment to question the status quo. So next slide, please. Okay, let me jump onto the slide. Going back to the topic of conceptual art here and how it relates to the contemporary art and us here, conceptual art still lives. I think of Erwin Wurm, Martin Creed. For example, Tracy Emin is sometimes labeled as a second or third generation conceptualist. Yet perhaps there is also a problem with the term itself. Now it has evolved so much. In popular usage, conceptual art somehow came to denote all sorts of contemporary art forms that does not practice the traditional skills of painting and sculpture. As such, the term has come to be associated with various contemporary practices far removed from its original aim and forms lie. So therein lies the problem of defining the term itself. And it's more slippery than ever. Conceptual art now avoids living in just one time and place, resists ownership, and being turned into just another luxury item. Despite its utopian aims, conceptual art is still highly sought after by collectors, institutions, and is regularly offered and sold at galleries and auctions. Next, please. So how to determine if something is art? Well, we all know that to answer this question, how to determine if something is art or not is almost an impossible task. There are multiple ways of answering this, depending on who you ask. There are many quotes from philosophers, artists, critics, and moreover, the course of history that try to illuminate on this topic. It's not that there aren't already many definitions of art, but it's just that I find them a bit lacking or incomplete in some ways. Equally perplexing is the question of who determines if something is art or not. Is it the artist or the viewer, or does it lie somewhere in between on that spectrum? I think this topic raises more questions than answers, and we can just accept that this debate will go on for a very long time. Next, please. Next, please. So how to determine value of art? Could you show me the next slide, please? Okay, this is a question that all artists have to face. As a painting student back in the days, preparing for my graduation show, I was asked by the teacher to price my own artworks. Well, how could I do it? It proved to be an arbitrary decision, but I gained a good lesson in that. This is what all artists have to do and have dealt with for as long as they have been in existence, how to price their own artworks. So could you skip to the next slide, please? Yeah, I believe that there are two ways of addressing this: value in terms of monetary terms and value in the abstract philosophical sense. Of course, we understand that there is much more than just numbers and dollar signs. Art serves a far much noble role and purpose than that. And we all know that value of art, it goes beyond its price tags. So could we go back to the previous slide? Thank you. Nonetheless, I myself work at an auction house, and as a business, we do price art every day, day in and day out. And the factors that determine the pricing of an artwork that is offered at auction are determined by these various factors in a loose form here listed. So auction records are public, although it's not an exact science and there might be a lot of discussion until we come up with a final consensus internally or with a client. The past records do give us a sense of what the demand looks like for a specific artwork or type of artwork. And the pricing is a factor of that demand itself. So I find that non-traditional art formats such as large installation, video art, or works that are hard to store and maintain do pose a challenge to most collections. And this is no surprise for anyone who's familiar with the art world. That does not mean that at auctions we don't sell challenging artworks. If we believe in the work, and that it can achieve good prices, we will always be on the lookout for great works to put on an offer in our sales. And we really want to represent the wide-ranging collecting habits of our collectors. Next, please. Next. Okay, so are these practices being supported in Southeast Asia? Since we are here speaking for S.E.A. focus, I thought we might change the topic to open up the dialogue for the rest of our panelists here. Let's go beyond conceptual art itself and speak about collecting non-traditional art forms or any artworks with challenging format here. So personally, I find that there is a rich tradition of making and collecting non-traditional art forms here across the region. There are many daring avant-garde artists in the region, too many to mention, and same goes for the type of gallerists, public and private institutions in the region. And I've compiled a few examples in the following slides to show you all. Next, please. I find that performance, live, video, photography have a rich tradition as a media in Southeast Asia. There are lots of examples, and I'm only presenting a couple here to spark dialogue for us. This famous butter dance performance by Melati Suryodarmo is one of the most iconic pieces of performance video art from the region, I think. She debuted a 20-minute performance in 2000 at Berlin's Hebel Theater. Wearing high-heeled shoes and a fitted black dress, she begins dancing to the sound of ceremonial Indonesian drumming from Makassar. So she's treading on 20 blocks of butter that have been arranged on the floor. As the tempo of the drumming increases and the butter melts, she slips and drops on the floor. After each fall, she stands up and begins to dance again, so repeating the entire process. In anticipation of each inevitable fall, this creates this tension for the audience to see, generating both sympathy and fascination at her perseverance despite the apparent futility of her actions. This performance has been performed over 20 times in various locations, amongst them at Macam Museum in Jakarta. They presented her first solo exhibition in a museum setting, and that was in 2020. It showcased over 20 years of her art practice, including scheduled live performances, photography and video performances, and historical documentation. Next, please. And here we have Martha Atienza's video work, which is also collected and in an important Singaporean collection here. Born to a Dutch mother and Filipino father, Atienza has moved between Netherlands and the Philippines throughout her life. In 2017, the artist won an art prize at Art Basel, Switzerland for this work, Our Islands. In 2016, she was one of the 5 shortlisted artists for the Benetze Art Prize in Japan at the Singapore Biennale. And this single channel 72 minutes film is actually of an underground procession intended to draw light to the palpable oceanic climate change seen in the seabed of dead coral here in the video. The participants first move slowly across the screen from left to right, then reappear again on the left side of the screen. Actually experiencing the soundless video work here is almost like a voyeuristic act. You feel like you're a visitor to an aquarium. The costumes and animist traditions seen here in Our Islands further prompt the question, where and who do these islands belong to? Next, please. So here we have an artwork by Wen, Singaporean performance artist. Wen's work quickly gained international recognition since 1993, having performed and showcases artistic expressions in many international locations such as Gwangju Biennale and the 3rd Asia-Pacific Triennale in Australia in 1999. And the Singapore Art Museum, SAM, paid homage to this local pioneer of performance art with the exhibition Lucid Dreams in the Reverie of the Real, an expansive and diverse collection of over 40 installations, photographs, and videos drawn from Lee's entire portfolio. In 2012, Singapore Art Museum so this was the mid-career retrospective that they did. And also in 2019, Hong Kong-based nonprofit ArtAsia Archive organized an exhibition of his sketchbooks and notebooks, highlighting these as sites of performance. So this is another really important artist for the region, and his artwork, Journey of a Yellow Man, which started off as a critique of racial and ethnicities in 1992, has evolved into a meditation on freedom, humility, and religious practice over more than a decade. Next, please. And finally, we have Rickert's artwork showing here on our slide. He's a Thai contemporary artist residing in New York City, Berlin, and Chiang Mai, Thailand, born in Buenos Aires in Argentina in 1961. So his installations often take the form of stages or rooms for sharing meals like pad thai, cooking, reading, or playing music. Architecture or structures for living and socializing are a core element in his work. So Rickert's work is fundamentally about bringing people together, and his installations of from the early 1990s involved cooking meals in Paula Allen's gallery in New York, for example. And as a prelude to the opening of La Triennale in 2012, Rickert was invited to transform the main nave of the Grand Palais into a festive, large-scale, 12-hour banquet composed of a single meal. So this is what's showing here. And that brings me to my final slide. This, I really hope, would open up the discussion and facilitate what we're about to discuss on all the different facets of the topic that we've covered, and bringing it back to where we are here in Southeast Asia and what the collecting looks like in a non-traditional format. Thank you.
So Jim or Jasdeep, I don't know who would like to respond first to Sandy's presentation.
Jim, I think Jim should go first.
Oh, thanks, Jasdeep. Okay. I mean, thank you very much, Sandy. I guess the thing that's interesting in terms of conceptual art or these non-traditional mediums, I think ultimately underlying this question of, what is the value of the banana duct tape to the wall or something of that sort, is there is in the past a bit more of a standard idea, we think a standard idea of evaluating, paintings or things of that sort. Yet at the end of the day, if you think about it, a lot of contemporary paintings are using acrylic paint, and that same paint could have been used to paint the wall of your flat or appear on a canvas. And for some reason, as soon as it appears on a canvas, it becomes much more valuable. And in some cases, a solid colored painting with cuts in it became conceptual art that really changed the whole approach towards an interpretation of a painting. So I think the thing is we need to recognize that whenever we're talking about quote unquote the value, it's sort of a consensus. I mean, we can understand that a 1 square foot in an apartment space located in Orchard Road has fundamentally a very different value to that same 1 square foot if it's being somewhere in Pulau Ubin. It doesn't have the same sort of thing. And so in a sense, it's ultimately, what is the market? What is the thought? I mean, Andy Warhol is very famous for his saying that art is whatever you can get away with. And Ad Reinhardt is very famous for his view that art is art and everything else is everything else. And I think in a sense, that's kind of in a sense what we're getting at is what is this idea that's being put forward? And there are a large number of conceptual artists in Singapore that well beyond Sandy's comment. And I think those artists present a variety of mediums and ideas, and some of which that are incredibly incredibly profound in terms of the ideas they have. And I mean, the challenge is some of these are in galleries, and some of these you'll see at biennials, and it's up to us as the viewers to get a sense of, do these things move you? Do they cause you to think? And ultimately, that's part of what is the trigger, is does it cause you to think? Do you see something different? Does it give you a frame of reference? Jasdeep?
Please, this brings me back to 25 years ago when I first started my gallery. And times were very hard. We'd open with a Intang Rehearsal show, and the gallery was a new space, and I had to cut my costs. I'd actually used a stretcher bar of a canvas, just the stretcher bar. And I bought some coir rope, coconut rope, and I twirled this coconut rope right around the stretcher bar. I made it into a beautiful panel on which I put a lovely Entang painting on. And the title of the work was actually Learning to Kill Yourself. Fantastic work. After about 2 or 3 months, I'd only sold about one or two works. And times were really, really hard. So like on a Sunday afternoon, the last Sunday of the month, this really smart looking chap walks in. He walks around the gallery several times. We'd already sold the Entang, and there's a spotlight on the panel. And he was serious about buying something. And he came up to me, and I thought, this guy's going to bail the gallery out for the month. And he pointed to the empty panel with the spotlight on, and he said, is there a discount on that? And I was like, oh my God. And it crossed my mind to try and sell him the panel as well, but you know, I couldn't do that to him. So I very sadly told him back, we sold the work yesterday. It's been delivered. There's something else I can show you. And he was gone within a few seconds. Never saw him again. So that's my contribution to this discussion. I mean, yes, in all these questions that Sandy brought up, you know, how they determine the value of art, etc., etc. It's been very complicated because if you've realized, art in Southeast Asia has gone up and down and up and down over the past 2 decades in terms of prices. And it's very stressful for dealers, and I suppose also for collectors and the art world. How do you determine these values? Be it conceptual, video, painting. And after a lot of stress, I think after the first art boom, 2009, 11, around there, I just thought, you know what, we need to stick very closely to a sense of art history, what actually punctuates art history in Southeast Asia. And that's what we've actually done. We've tried to do, and we're still trying to do, because if you do realize, Singapore doesn't have, as the center of Southeast Asian art, we don't have an undergraduate program on the history of art. That's shocking. Despite all our infrastructure, we do not have that. So I see this in a positive light, because when there is one, and I think there are efforts to go more towards this direction, it's going to help all of us with the understanding, the collector base, the artist, the art world. Everything will actually, I think, develop in a very positive sense. So we are, you know, very upbeat about things in the region. Elaine, there's some pictures of Samsa Siahan that are of the gallery. Yeah, no, this is a, let me talk about this picture now that we're on it. So during the art boom, what happened was the prices went through the roof, and it was very scary. Like, how do you create some form of validation? So one of the things that we did was actually this show at the NUS Museum with the Jendela group from Indonesia. And according to me, one of the most important contemporary art groups over the past 20 odd years. Why we did it, especially as a gallery, we've got actually not much business to be in a museum, but there hasn't been much institutional representation of Southeast Asian art in the museums as we'd like to see it. So we did this, and we brought this wonderful show together, borrowed a lot of works from collectors, but at the same time, we managed to very luckily get a wonderful and I think historically important context writing from Ahmad Mashadi on the context of the Jandela group, which is fantastic. You know, it just puts everything in a certain time frame, and it leaves scope for a lot of additional discussion. And from there, I think we see value generating from shows like this and from writings like this. They're very important. There's another one, Elaine, of the show. This is also the NUS one. And the next one, please. Okay, this is Samsa Siahan. This is this work. Samsa Siahan is probably one of the most important social political artists in Indonesia over the past 40 years. Completely disappeared. Sandy's auction wouldn't have heard of it, but so important. He was so active in 1993 with his Jakarta Biennale, where he dug up the ground of the Biennale, and to comment on the 1965 atrocities, the clampdown on the communists. So we spent about 2 years digging up, researching a lot of this man's career, who he was, what he did, his shows, and especially his works. And with the research and with the curators, we had TK Sabapati and we had Asri Wright contribute the writings for this artist who had passed away in 2005. And this work and the following work, Olympia, these are now works within, this is within the National Gallery's collection. So, this is what I think our gallery's been doing, of trying to create some sort of a historical context of where our artists are coming from. What are they contributing to the art world? And so that's we see a challenge, and we see a very positive future for Southeast Asian art. Elaine?
Right. Thanks, Jim, and thanks, Jasdeep. Actually, I would like to start with my first question to you, Jasdeep,
Yes.
as you take your sip of, I don't know what delicious drink you're having.
Thank you.
You gave a little background about your gallery, and Sandy has explained the historical context of conceptual art. I wanted to know if you could speak about your own encounters over the years with non-traditional art forms such as video and performance here in Southeast Asia, because for instance, in Singapore, I know that there's this history of conceptual art practices, adopted by many of its most revered and loved artists, including Tang Da Wu, Amanda Heng, and Huyen
Yes.
Chong. So as a gallerist, are these works financially lucrative, say, compared to painting? Could you keep a gallery afloat selling these kinds of works? And have you ever presented works like this? And if so, how do you explain it to your collectors and potential clients?
To start off, as a gallerist, I take video, conceptual, painting, performance, installation, everything at the same level. It has to be really good. Now, to find a good painter, artist, painter, is very difficult. It's one of the most difficult professions to be in. And let's say in the art world, let's say there's 100 painters. You'd be lucky if you'd find one. At the same time, the amount of video artists and installation artists out there, strictly, doing video and installation and digital, probably about in that proportion of 1 to 100 for painters, probably 5 to 10. So the chances of you getting lucky on finding a video or conceptual artist, strictly conceptual artist, is not easy. You'd be very lucky. That said, we do have a program at the Art Lab to actually, once a year before COVID, to actually invite performance artists from around the region, mainly Indonesia, because the costs are quite high to fly in an artist and to pay them their fees, etc., at the Art Lab, to encourage it. Our shaping geographies show actually had a lot of, we had two video artists, which we managed to sell one, which is very encouraging. But that said, just on those figures of my arbitrary figures of 10 to 1 or 20 to 1, a video artist is not going to pay the gallery's rent. It has to be encouraged. And we are trying to do that whenever we can get our hands on a video artist that's good. We try our best. And like I said, even with our performance programming that we have at the Art Lab, we try and encourage these forms of art, because it has to be done. We can't just stick to painting. I think it's unfair to the art world if we just did that.
Actually, this would be great to hear from Jim about, if you could recall the very first time you encountered a conceptual work where you actually contemplated, and perhaps you even did acquire a work like this. What made you respond to that work? Was it its meaning, or was it the work's significance? And also, I think all of us, on this panel are aware that a lot of this work is, very difficult to sell. So was it also its affordability, or a kind of combination of both?
I think there's very different periods. One, encountering conceptual art, I think like a lot of people, the first time you encounter those things are in museums. So at that point, you're never contemplating the idea of would I acquire something like that. And in commercial galleries, I have to admit, it is rare to be encountering purely conceptual art performances and that sort of thing. It took a while. And I think within Southeast Asia, the traditional galleries in the early days were much more conventional types of items that you would put on your walls, which I think is a topic that's going to be one of tomorrow's lectures, is moving off the wall. But I think it took me a while until I finally started purchasing video or the remnants of a performance and that type of work. And yes, in many of those cases, I know that there's no secondary market for it. So whatever I pay for it is, it has to speak to me. But I don't purchase works with the idea I'm going to make money off of them. It's not an asset class. It's not. That's not the point. It's the real point is, does that work cause you to think differently than you might have before? I purchased a work a few years ago by Jason Wee, which was specifically to make me uncomfortable and to bring out a message that other people don't think the way I do, and to remind myself of that, especially in these days where we have news media streamed to us just the way we like to think about the world. It's important to find works that challenge you to say, there are people who see the world in a different way. And so I think those types of things are really helpful to have as part of a collection in terms of keeping yourself interested and challenged.
Yeah. So, before this panel, Jim, you had mentioned to us that, your colleagues in your company, in your insurance company, were totally fascinated by the banana, and probably more likely its price tag more than anything else, right? And, the market is so incredibly strong, before COVID, and, even at auctions, we see that it still continues to be strong with this, Botticelli.
Mhm.
And especially here in Asia, where so much of the conversation revolves around price. And this is really a question for all three of you. Do you believe just because a work sells, that it qualifies as art? And how important is price to you when you consider an artwork's lasting value or significance? Actually, let's take the word value out, significance.
Oh goodness. I guess as a normal person, I have my budget of what I'm sort of thinking I can spend for the year, and unfortunately, most years I tend to exceed that budget. But So I think it's, I don't know, it's a combination of excitement, a combination of passion. I mean, that really you ultimately are responding to. It's really not common sense so much that really drives some of these decisions of what's the value and whether or not you're going to buy something. It's really, does it speak to you? Does it make you say, oh my God? Does it make you really, do you think about it? I mean, I recently purchased a video work that I've been thinking about for 10 years. And I was just fortunate that it was still available. And so I think those are the sort of things that are important in terms of this idea of what is the value of a work.
Jasdeep, Sandy?
Yes. What's the value of a work?
What is the significance if we move away from the word value? Because when people
Yes.
hear value, they automatically think money, right?
Yeah.
The significance.
It's, again, I go back to, for me personally, as a gallerist, we try and stick as close as possible to a historical context. When we were doing Masriadi, we commissioned a book on him by T.K. Sabapati. Went through his whole corpus of work, very comprehensive book, and somewhere in there, just 2 lines, which is the least significant to an art historian. There was 2 lines that said, by the year 2002, this chap had achieved something which was way beyond what his contemporaries had achieved. For the commercial world, that's great value. For the art historical world, for an art historian, that's probably the least important. So there's a whole, it's a wide gap between different aspects of what a museum curator might value culturally, or a collector, a gallerist. It is, very difficult to determine. But as a gallerist, I stick very closely to history. Jendela Group, Uniza, Samsa Siahan, Suzanne Victor. What is their contribution in their region, in the context of which they've actually lived or grew up in? And we do put a great emphasis on that. And I think it's helped us a lot. It's helped me to sleep a lot at night, because it's not easy to try and plot your path as a gallerist moving forward. On the lighter side, in our Jogja Art Lab, we have a sign, a pretty large 2-meter sign going up the stairs, quite discreetly placed actually. It's only art when it's sold. And we deliberately put that in to sort of like try and provoke. The Jogja is very pro-socio-political. Art has to be socio-political. But so we deliberately put that to try and redress and get the artist to like chill out a bit, do your artwork, be confident about what you're doing, and we'll try and support you as much as possible. Sorry if sorry for the digression. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. Well, Elaine, for your question, I think it's really similar to what Jasdeep has said as well previously, that we do what we can at auctions. We try to, of course, include as many challenging and difficult pieces as possible in an auction. I think this is the future. For example, there's digital art. We've sold a Team Lab digital art work in our previous sale, and it did tremendously well. It was an artist record, and still it was on a spectrum of safe and not safe. I think it was still something that was in the middle, I would say, because it was still 5 panels, so 5 different video channels, and houseable. So we do what we can, but at the same time, we keep on trying to push different artists to see what the reaction is. Some may work and some may not work. We also offered an On Kawara work, which we really loved and believed in, and had good results for that. So I do believe that because of COVID, And because of this type of information age, there are a lot of art forms that have significance, and it will continue to grow in its significance, and it will be more and more widely accepted over time. So it's just a matter of time, and we do have to be responsible in contributing in some way or form.
We have a question from the audience, which from Cleo Ding, who says, she asks, what type of Southeast Asian art are most favorable amongst collectors? And is there a difference in taste preferences between local and overseas collectors? Maybe Jasdeep or Sandy could answer that question.
Sandy first? Or?
Jasdeep, I think, or Elaine, I think that this is quite simple. It's still predominantly based on traditional art forms, but I do think that there is an undercurrent of this movement towards more and more challenging art forms. You see that there are a lot of collectors who are collecting these things and have amazing solid concrete collections, like for example Pak Wiu Wahono in Jakarta, who has his whole collection based on zeitgeist and what is really relevant to the now, and all this bio art that he's collected. So I think it's still it's a mix, but in terms of if you're looking at a pie chart, it is I think, like the rest of the world, not just in Southeast Asia, very much still on the more traditional art forms that will still be, most favorable amongst collectors here. Yeah.
And
I think, sorry, Elaine?
Yeah, go ahead, Jasdeep, sorry.
I think there's quite a clear demarcation. A collector from outside the region is less likely to buy something which is very pertinent and socio-political to the region itself. Primarily, I suppose, because it doesn't have much dialogue with what they have in mind, or so artists which have left the whole traditional ideas, the whole local concept, although it's still within the artwork, those artists are probably a lot more susceptible to an international market. And as a gallerist, we have actually tried to, not tried to, but we try and sort of like show artists which actually have a bit more of an international language, if I can speak about that in a very general manner. And I think it's actually helped us, because we'd like our artists to be recognized as artists themselves in their own right, and rather than artists belonging to a particular region. I think that actually handicaps us quite a bit if once we paint a picture of this person just coming from that particular region, and we'd rather artists speak to an international audience.
We have another question from the audience. I'm so happy that there are people asking questions. So I feel like we should take this opportunity and encourage more of this, right? Because I've been on panels where there wasn't a single question asked. And this is for the three panelists from someone anonymous who doesn't give his or her name. They want to know, would the same work by Maurizio Cattelan have sold if it was presented in a local exhibition or art fair, or maybe even perhaps at S.E.A. Focus? What do you think?
I think that that work itself is actually what I find really impressive about that work, is that I think it was actually made for the art fair. I mean, artists sometimes do consider, where is this going to be shown and who is it going to be shown to? Biennial, solo show, or art fair. And I do suspect that Maurizio probably, I'm guessing, with Miami being the party town of the art fair world, he probably designed his little banana for that wall, for the audience. And perhaps has a very strong perhaps even a very strong critique on the audience or a comment or to engage them. And I think he did that very successfully. Now, will that work in C-Focus? I think it would, but it's already been done. I can imagine it would. It would. The art public here is actually pretty sophisticated. They would enjoy the comment and the artwork.
It would sell for 120 or 150,000 US dollars in Singapore?
Maybe less one digit.
There would be some implications.
Yeah. I think it would. I'm pretty sure it would. We have some pretty sophisticated clients around here, art collectors.
Do you agree, Jim?
I mean, I agree with Jasdeep's comment that it was very much tailored to Miami Beach, to Art Basel Miami. And I think there's a lot of different levels of that. And that's key with this particular artist's practice. You know, the banana symbol in Europe, coming as a European artist, where there's a lot of Europeans who will go to Art Basel Miami. If you go to any art gallery or museum in Germany, you're going to see a spray painted banana on the outside. So it's a specific fruit that is very much tied into the context of European galleries and art, contemporary art. On the other hand, Miami Beach is also the main fair that attracts Latin America. And yeah, I was speaking with a collector from Latin America who thought of it as very specific work commenting on the banana republics of parts of Latin America and some of the dialogues about colonialism and about the role that the fruit trade played in the colonizing experience. And so I think the thing is there are so many, although it may look very simple, I think that's the power of this particular work, is the ability to have so many layers of understanding and issues that are there. So I think there are collectors in Southeast Asia who are attracted to the intellectual parts of issues that are part of art making, and they would respond to it. You know, so I think this is an exciting time to be involved in contemporary art.
I agree, and I guess what Jim is saying is that it would sell for that price if it were actually a durian. So because there's the local context, you know, some reference to what's going on. So maybe it would sell better if it were a durian. Who knows?
I think there's quite a lot of conceptual art going on. Ugo Ntoro is one of them. He did this very lovely little pencil case sized box. Actually looked like a coffin, more like a coffin. And in it, he put a pipe, a smoker's pipe. And the reference, of course, was to the iconic master, founder of Indonesian modern art, Sugiono, who used to have his pipe, and he put his pipe in because Ugo was so disappointed with the art world in Yogyakarta. He said the spirit of Sugiono is dead, so he put that pipe into a little coffin and said, "Okay, there you go." And I thought that's brilliant. You know, we have, I mean, the modern generation of Indonesian artists, for them, conceptual art, I think, and ideas of conceptual art especially, they very easily appropriate it into their artwork, and it adds that different added dimension to their paintings sometimes, or to their sculpture or whatever. And I think this is something that we should also consider. Conceptual art in its pure sense is great, but it also bleeds into other art forms, sculpture, painting, and as I mentioned with our friend Mr. Ugo as well.
Actually, I have one final question before I know we're a little bit over, but I didn't even get through half of my questions for the three of you. But this is really for Jim and Jasdeep because it's related to Southeast Asia. So if the market for conceptual and non-traditional media is still in its fledgling stage, which I think all of you have basically said today here in Asia, yet is one of the dominant practices in the region, whose responsibility do you think it is to support this kind of work?
I would primarily say it's down to the gallerists, because we provide the primary platform. Hopefully we can sell something and put some money back in their pockets. I do think that, and if there's any artists out there, good conceptual art, you can survive from it. You surely can. You just need to keep working at it, and hopefully galleries do include some form of conceptual art into their programming. So it is surely possible, and the responsibility is down to the galleries. I just poured myself a new glass. I hope this is not the last question. I feel a bit cheated now.
We could keep going, but I'm not sure how S.E.A. Focus would feel about that. We could keep going, just the three of us, the four of us. Yeah.
But I think, Elaine, in terms of that role, I think the collector as well as institutions play a fundamental role. I mean, because ultimately, we're the ones purchasing those works and and adding them to our collections, sharing them with others, and whether it be through lending programs or donations, etc. But ultimately, the collecting community plays a key role in helping keep artists able to create art. And otherwise, they're going to have to do something horrible, like work for an insurance company or something. So,
but a lot of the conceptual artists in Singapore, they often have other jobs, right?
Some do, and but others are full-time artists as well.
Well, I think I'm not sure if it was the same person who asked the question about the Catalan banana being sold in Singapore or in a local fair. This person also said, how can we, how do you think younger people, say in their 20s, the Gen Zs, can contribute to their position, and how can we help promote their interest and awareness in this specific field? So maybe there's a way we can incorporate, the younger people within the field to, be aware of this work. And
I think that there's an exhibition at Gilman Barracks right now called Artists as Collectors, which has a collection of works that were lent by predominantly Singaporean artists, of works that they collected and have in their own personal collection. A large number of these works are more conceptual in nature. And you get this sense of the idea sharing and idea making and the dialogue that's taking place amongst artists, interpreted by artists, that is part of driving their practice and thought processes. And so I think, at that level, a lot of those works are quite affordable for young people. And they're works often done by people from the same generation, and that can speak to them and they can understand that. And I think that that's also a really positive thing, not just in Singapore, but throughout Southeast Asia, to have that kind of relationship amongst creative people and people interested in the creative part of society.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that show, because I'm not, at a certain point we had 78 people listening, and I'm not entirely sure what their backgrounds are, but for those who aren't so familiar, not just in Singapore but other parts within Southeast Asia, if they're not so familiar with conceptual art or non-traditional practices, where would you recommend someone to go see this type of work?
I think during Singapore Art Week, there's a whole host of potential locations and things that people can do in terms of various venues. SEAfocus is one, but there are a whole variety of professional galleries, including Jasdeep's, as well as some special events that are taking place throughout Singapore Art Week. And so I think explore as much as you can. And then, obviously there's the National Gallery, and because of COVID, there are a lot of virtual museums these days where you can virtually visit the Met, or virtually visit the Tate, or virtually visit any of these other institutions to get acquainted with art. And I think we're seeing a lot more online. And it's one of the reasons that I think video works and virtual reality works are getting a lot more attention, because we're used to seeing things now on a screen. That's becoming a very, immediate way for us to interact these days.
Yeah, actually, one other person had mentioned something that video could perhaps, because of COVID, be embraced, could be a more accessible form of art, because you can share it and experience it without necessarily having to have a physical presence at, for instance, a gallery or museum.
Mm-hmm. True.
All right, I don't know. I don't want to, we're already 15 minutes over. I haven't gotten a signal that we can keep going. So I guess we should wrap it up. Thank you to all the audience members who asked questions. And thank you, Sandy and Jasdeep, and especially Jim, for taking time away from your real day job and participating in this really absorbing conversation on determining the value of contemporary art. And speaking of value, there is some really incredible art on view in person and online at S.E.A. Focus, much of it within everybody's budget. So I encourage all of you to go check it out and hopefully acquire a piece of art and support an artist. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you again, Jim, Sandy, Jasdeep, and Elaine, for your time and discussion today. Just some short announcements before we wrap up. Coming up next in our SEAspotlight Talk series tomorrow at 3 p.m. is Off the Walls, a talk on what collecting looks like in an expanded field of creative practices, and perhaps quite an apt extension of today's discussion. It features speakers Jeanette Chittick, Michelangelo Sampson, Funk's Jackson Tan, and is moderated by Tracy Phillips. For more information and updates on our talks and on SEAfocus, please visit our website at seafocus.sg and also follow us on our socials, Facebook and Instagram. Once again, thank you all. Take care and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.